everyone. Welcome to our conversation about student loans. I'm Adriana Morga. I'm a financial wellness reporter here at the Associated Press. I'm thrilled to have you all join us today. As we all know, federal student loan payments are restarting this month after a 3-year payment pause that was caused because of the pandemic. This can bring a lot of questions from you all and also a lot of stress. So we're here to address all of that. Maybe not help with the stress, but definitely many answers to questions. Hopefully, and then can help you navigate this time. To help answer your questions, I'm joined by three fantastic experts. First, welcome Amy Czulada, Outreach and Advocacy Manager at the Student Borrowing Protection Center, Alfredo Camacho, Western Regional Director at Young Invincibles, and Betsy Mayotte, President of the Institute of Student Loan Advisors. And thank you, the three of you, for being here. Before we fully begin, I want to take a second to let you know how you can ask questions. We are collecting questions through the link that is in the description of this event, and we'll try to answer as many as we can in our half of an hour together. So let's start, shall we? After the payment pause was not extended further this summer, interest began accumulating in September last month, and payments are resuming this month. If you have student loans and you haven't made any payments during the payment pause, it might take an adjustment, so we get it. So the first question is, what are some initial things that borrowers need to do to prepare to make payments? I'm going to pass that question to Amy.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me today. So the first thing that folks could do is log into their studentaid.gov account. That's going to be your clearinghouse with the Federal Student Aid the Federal Student Aid Department of Education website. And if you don't remember your login, you can reset it. That'll send you a link via your email or your phone number to get logged back in. And then from there, you can find out, what type of loans you have, how much, debt you have, who your servicer is, when your first due date will be, and you can go directly from there to your servicer site to make a payment or to check out when your monthly bill will be due.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Alfredo, if a person's loan servicer changed, what do they need to do? What are some steps that they need to take?
Yeah, so as Amy mentioned, that first step would be logging in to make sure if your loan servicer changed. The second step would be to contact that loan servicer, create an account. That actually happened with me. My servicer changed. I had to create an account with Morga, and that is my new servicer. And so I've been in contact with them ahead of the, the repayment, pause ending. So that would be, the best step that they could take is to make sure that they know who that servicer is and that they're in contact with them.
Thank you. For anyone just joining us, we're in a conversation about the restart on student loan payments. Remember, if you'd like to ask us a question, you can send it over through the link in the description of this event. So moving on, Betsy, could you tell me what income-driven repayment plans are and how can borrowers apply to them?
Sure. So in the federal student loan programs, there's a lot of lower payment options, and they fall into two buckets. A bucket of payment plans that we call the income-driven plans that are based exclusively on your income and family size. And then there's another bucket of lower payment options that your payment's really going to be based on your balance, things like interest-only payments or extended plans. The income-driven plans, as I mentioned, they're all exactly the same except where they're different. They do all base your payment on your adjusted gross income, and then they subtract a portion of it based on your family size and the state that you live in. What's nice about these plans is that they all have a baked-in forgiveness component. So if you're on one of the income-driven plans for 20 or 25 years, depending on the plan or what kind of loans you have, if there's still a balance, that balance will be forgiven after 20 or 25 years of being on the plan. The superstar of the income-driven plans right now that everyone's talking about is the new one called the SAVE plan. And what we really like about SAVE is that amongst the income-driven plans, for most borrowers, not all, but for most, SAVE is going to be the lowest monthly payment, if that's what you're looking for. But what's even better about SAVE is that if your payment is lower than the amount of interest that's accruing every month, the remaining interest will be forgiven. So you don't have to worry about your balance going up every month.
Thank you, Betsy. I know that there's so many people that sometimes they're like employment change. They have a job and then they lose in the middle, or vice versa. Right now they might be unemployed and they might find a job in a few months. Amy, could you tell me a little bit about how in the SAFE plan that Betsy just mentioned, like how that kind of goes out when your like employment status changed?
Yeah, this is a great question, especially since so many people, and just as you mentioned, their employment changed over the course of the pandemic, or their contact information may have changed over the course of the pandemic. So it's a great idea to make sure your contact is up to date. Your contact information is up to date, both at studentaid.gov and at your servicer's site. But related to your question that you just asked, so if you were on an income-driven repayment plan, the nice thing about income-driven repayment plans, as Betsy mentioned, is that it's pegged to your income. It's not pegged to the balance. And so, the nice thing is that if your income changes drastically, so say you get laid off, you're unemployed, you can update that status with your servicer to let them know, so that they automatically, make it so that your payment should be then $0 a month because, you don't have an income at the moment. Or so, if you have a drastic change of employment, you can update that so that you get a lower monthly payment. But the other nice thing about income-driven repayment plans is that you only have to update your income once a year. And so if your income, goes up within a year, so say I recertify my income right now, and then it goes up say my income goes up in January with the change of the year, I don't have to, update that income again until, next October, since it's October 2nd. So it gives you a little bit of leeway. And so for folks who are entering repayment right now, they have a little bit of time to recertify their income, so that if it did change and went up drastically over the course of the pandemic, they have some time before they have to recertify.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Alfredo, can you talk a little bit about the on-ramp period that President Biden announced?
Yeah, so we're really excited about this on-ramp period. It's a return to payments. It's a big change for many borrowers. So the department was aware of that, and they are instituting this 12-month on-ramp period to repayment. So it runs from October 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2024. And that makes sure that financially vulnerable borrowers who miss monthly payments during this period are not considered delinquent. They're not reported to credit bureaus. They're not placed in default, and they're not referred to any debt collection agencies during that time. However, payments are still due during that time, and interest will continue to accrue. And while the Department of Education will not report borrowers as delinquent or, during this period, they do not control how credit scoring companies factor in missed or delayed payments. So very important, to take advantage of that as, to your best judgment. But it is a really powerful tool that is going to help many borrowers get used to this return to payment, including myself.
Yeah, and if I could just add, this is great information, but I want to clarify something because it's caused a lot of confusion with borrowers. It's 100% true that they're not going, like normally if you were 90 days past due, they would negatively report you to the credit bureaus. And that's not going to happen, which is a great safety net. However, as Alfredo mentioned, you are still due those payments. So if you don't make them, you will get delinquency notices in the mail, and you may even get delinquency phone calls from the servicer. So that part hasn't changed, and I know there's some confusion there.
Thank you, Alfredo, and thank you, Betsy, for that. That is great to know. Amy, how does it affect, for example, if someone takes advantage of the on-ramp period, but they're also part of, let's say, the PSLF or an income-driven repayment plan? How does that affect that? Like, how does that play out?
Yeah, this is a great question. So, the on-ramp period is great for all the reasons that Alfredo mentioned. One thing to consider, though, is that your interest will continue to accrue if you don't make payments during this time. And if you're seeking something like public service loan forgiveness, which is the program that gets your debt canceled after 10 years, of making payments and working in the public service, like for a nonprofit or for a government agency, that time won't count towards PSLF. And so if you miss a payment, that monthly payment won't count because, of course, you didn't make it. One other thing to consider with the on-ramp period and the way it interacts with this new SAFE plan that was announced last year by President Biden is that under the SAFE plan, one really exciting feature that is going to be put into place next summer in July is that folks who initially borrowed either $12,000 or less are able to get cancellation after 10 years of repayment, which is a faster timeline for most folks under income-driven repayment. Usually it's 20 or 25 years. And so this is a faster timeline. And then that goes up on a sliding scale. If you borrowed less than $13,000, and you've been in repayment for 11 years. So it kind of goes up in that way. But this is going to be, you know, a right that folks have next summer to get their debt canceled if they enroll in the new SAVE plan and have been in repayment for that long. So we're going to see a lot of folks getting, you know, their debt canceled in July. But so it might be, you know, if this works for you, that, you know, this might be something to consider under the on-ramp, you know, that you wouldn't be required to make payments, but you do have a right to get your debt canceled next July.
This is great. Thank you, Amy, for that. Betsy, what are some actions, I'm sorry, that borrowers can take if they're finding it hard to manage their budget while they're making payments?
So this is a great time for everyone to take a closer look at their budget. You know, I'd like to see a trend where everybody reevaluates their budget and their student loan strategy on an annual basis. The best time to do that, by the way, is tax time. But it's not tax time now. It's restart of repayment now. So it might be a good opportunity to take a look at the budget, see if there's places where you could find some extra dollars to pay towards the student loans, if that's what your goal is. You know, some people are pursuing forgiveness, some people are trying to pay their loans off aggressively, and then, you know, as we mentioned before, take a look at all the different lower payment options that are out there to see which one best fits into your budget.
That is great. Thank you. We're getting a lot of questions from audiences about private loans. And I know we're right now speaking about federal student loans, right? But I think that there's obviously a lot of people who had a combination of both, like private loans and like then, federal student loans and then private loans to fund their education. I wonder if any of you has any sort of you know, words to them as to how they can kind of manage and how they can, you know, revise what they're doing. Yeah, any sort of advice on that aspect?
So a lot of the things that we're talking about right now are, you know, federal programs like cancellation programs such as public service loan forgiveness, or this, you know, these income-driven repayment plans, the IDR account adjustment, which is something that is like a one-time audit that's happening right now. All of this is for federal borrowers. And so there aren't as many resources out there for private student loan borrowers. However, the National Consumer Law Center has an amazing resource that we can share with you to manage private student debt. So that would be a good place to start, I think. But yeah, I'm not sure if anyone else has other thoughts.
Yeah, so private student loan, they're a sticky wicket, right? Because often there are few, if any, lower payment options available with private loans. For the borrowers that we work with, a lot of times what we see is a good way to potentially lower the payment and the overall cost is to refinance if they can. We're seeing a lot of people with enormous interest rates on their private loans, 12, 15, 18%. Even if your credit doesn't put you in a position where you can refinance the whole thing, one tactic that we like to recommend is to refinance a little bit at a time. So you might not get approved to refinance all of your private loans at once to a lower rate, but you might be able to a little bit at a time. The other thing we notice is that private borrowers who have made their first 12 or 24 payments on time are often more likely to get approved for a lower interest refinance than someone who's like just out of school, for example. So refinancing to lower the interest rate can be a way to lower the payment and again lower the cost.
Thank you, Amy and Betsy. One thing that in our reporting we came across a lot is a lot of people that are, you know, I feel like there's this sometimes misconception that borrowers are younger, they're millennials and they're, you know, in their 30s or something. But we got a lot like a word of many people that are like they're older, they're in their 60s, in their 70s, and they are struggling to pay these student loan payments. So I was wondering if there's anything, any like program or help or ways that these people can manage their student loans.
This is a pet policy issue of mine. I'm so glad you brought it up. You know, there's a sustaining myth amongst everyone, policymakers, the general public, voters, excuse me, is that student loan debt is a young person's issue, and only a young person's issue. And that's so far from the truth. Half of all borrowers are over the age of 30, a quarter are over the age of 45, and the fastest growing population of consumers that are holding and struggling with student debt are the over 65s. Thankfully, these plans that we've talked about, these income-driven plans especially, can be really life-saving or budget-saving to people that are close to retirement or are retired and on a fixed income. Many of the retired borrowers that we work with end up with a $0 payment under these income-driven repayment plans. And don't forget, there's that forgiveness component at the end. The other thing that I always bring up, especially if I'm speaking with with someone who is, how shall I put this delicately, has seen a lot of rotations of the earth, is to think about the program called Total and Permanent Disability Discharge. If they're unable to work due to their age, if they have an illness or they're frail, their doctor may very well be willing to sign off on the Total and Permanent Disability Discharge form, and that could make the loans go away altogether.
One other thing that I might add as well is that right now something called the IDR account adjustment is going on. It's basically a one-time audit of all accounts to see how close people are to these thresholds of 20 or 25 years in repayment, which kind of affects older borrowers, more than some younger borrowers. And so, you have a right to get your debt canceled after 20 or 25 years in repayment. Last year it came out that servicers were routinely steering people into forbearances and deferments rather than offering these income-driven repayment plans that would have given them a much more affordable option for repayment and put them on this timeline towards cancellation after 20 or 25 years. So, if you are an older borrower and this is something that is affecting you, you might, and you've been in repayment this long and that, I would check out, the IDR account adjustment and see if you have to take any steps in order to take advantage of this that's going on right now, because there is a deadline for consolidation by the end of the year. So December 31st is this deadline. And so I would check out, more about the IDR account adjustment to see if this affects you and if you need to take any steps.
Thank you, Betsy and Amy. This is such an important topic, and you guys got great information. Talking about deadlines, Amy, just that you mentioned, are there any other deadlines related to student loans that we should tell people about, that they should be aware? Anyone that, if you have one in mind,
Yeah, so there's two in particular. So Amy alluded already to December 31st. For borrowers that have, for example, FFEL loans or Perkins that want to take advantage of this one-time adjustment, they need to consolidate before December 31st. For borrowers who have loans with different counts, say they're pursuing public service loan forgiveness, and some of their loans have 5 years worth of credits and some have 7. If they consolidate before the end of the year, the consolidation will get credit for the highest count. The other deadline I want to bring up is something that here at TSLA we call the double super secret consolidation. And that's for Parent Plus loans. There is a way for Parent Plus loans to make those loans eligible for things like save or pay as you earn, but they have to go through this sort of complicated process called double consolidation. That loophole is closing July of 2025. So anybody with Parent Plus loans that could benefit from that, they need to make sure that it's done by July of 2025. And if you're interested in knowing about double consolidation, if you go to the TSLA website, which is freestudentloanadvice.org, we have it all explained on our consolidation page, including step-by-step instructions.
One other deadline that comes to mind is related to Fresh Start, which is for defaulted borrowers. And so if you've been in default, there's 7 million people in default. If you were in default prior to the pandemic, this is meant to be a quicker, easier way out of default, but it's not completely automatic. And so you have basically 1 year after the payment pause ends. And so until next, like August 30th or so, to either contact your guarantee agency to get on a repayment plan. So you have to request either a repayment plan or, request aid and go back to school. And so those are your 2 options in terms of action items, but that deadline will be, next August 30th.
If I could just add one more. So I know that we are talking about the SAVE plan and how amazing it is. And if it is a plan that works for you, definitely enroll in it. And I believe some borrowers were automatically enrolled in it. But if the pay program, the pay as you earn program, is the plan that works best for you, it is being sunsetted after July 1st of 2024. So you want to enroll in that So you can log into studentaid.gov and actually look at all your options and see which is going to be your best bet. So that does sunset after July 1st, 2024. If you're already enrolled, it will not sunset, but it will not allow any other borrowers to enroll in that program after that date.
Thank you for three of you. This is great, and I'm guessing maybe one more that maybe I can add is the on-rev period, the grace period. So people know it's 12 months only. So that's great to know. Betsy, you mentioned Parent Plus loans, and I think that's another, like the second question that we get a lot as well is like people saying like, you know, I got into a lot of debt because I wanted to send my children to school, and now I have this huge amount. I know that you mentioned the double consolidation. Are there any other resources for people who have a large amount of Parent Plus loans?
Yeah, so there definitely is not as many options for Parent Plus loans as there are for the other federal student loans. However, Parent Plus loans just on their own, without having to take any extra steps, are eligible for the lower payment options that aren't based on income. So graduated repayment, extended repayment, consolidation. They are eligible for the income-driven plan called income contingent if they consolidate, and then they only have to consolidate the one time. And then if they want access to things like Save, they have to go through that nutty double consolidation loophole that I mentioned earlier. One thing I want to make sure to point out that a lot of people don't realize is that Parent Plus loans are eligible for public service loan forgiveness, but it's based on the parent borrower's employment. We get a lot of questions where, you know, there might be an arrangement in the family where the student who benefited from the Parent Plus loan is the one actually making the payments, and maybe they're working for a PSLF eligible employer. Unfortunately, that's not going to matter for the Parent Plus. So the income-driven plans are based on the Parent Plus, the parent borrower's income. Public service loan forgiveness eligibility is based on the parent borrower's employment.
And if I could just add too, in relation to the public service loan forgiveness program, you know, Parent Plus borrowers are eligible to get that PSLF credit through this IDR account adjustment that's happening right now. So they can get retroactive credit. You know, if they've worked in public service at any point since October 1st of 2007, you know, they're able to kind of accrue retroactive time that way. And so it's a great time to be kind of like checking out your student loans, seeing what options are available and what you're eligible for, and if you need to take any action steps.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a question from an audience member. Her name is Maribel. She said, if I have over 10 years of working for a nonprofit, but my loan has yet to be reviewed, should I apply for a forbearance or something else? I'm assuming she's having trouble repaying her loan.
Yeah, so you have two choices here. You could make the payments knowing that if it turns out you've made over the 120 payments needed, that you would get a refund, assuming those overpayments were made, you know, weren't made before a consolidation. Or you can request forbearance to have the payments on hold while they review your account for forgiveness.
Great. Thank you, Betsy. One question that comes up a lot, and I think it's a bit similar to one that I asked earlier, but it is related to being unemployed. We know that a lot of people are having a lot of issues. Specifically, I feel like sometimes young people finding, you know, a job right after college, and they're just kind of having a little bit of trouble finding, you know, employment. What are some resources or things that people in this situation should keep in mind? Amy, I'm going to pass that to you.
Sure. So I think definitely checking out income-driven repayment options, you know, given that you're unemployed and maybe making no money or very little money, you know, it might be a great option. You could also check out, you know, so the Save plan would be great if you're able to get into it. You can apply at, you know, studentaid.gov/IDR or call your servicer and find out what your monthly payment would be under this plan. So that was where maybe I would start on, but this is, you know, I guess I want to say, like, you're also not alone. You know, 20% of borrowers graduated during the pandemic, you know, so they're new to the idea of repayment. This is the first time they're going to be interacting with their servicer. And so we recognize that it's a really stressful time. And so kind of checking out some of these resources is a great place to start.
Thank you. Thank you. One thing that we're also seeing a lot in our questions is, you know, people's loan servicer website not being great or not working, and how they're having a little bit of a hard time navigating when they through this time, because they have questions and they ask and they don't get them respond, or they don't hear back. What are some actions that people can take to sort of help with that?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're in an extraordinary time when it comes to student loans. Every single student loan borrower is coming due for payment. We're talking tens of millions at exactly the same time. So we're absolutely seeing really long call hold times. We've seen most, if not all, of the servicer websites crash at some point in time. Thankfully, I personally haven't seen them crash for an extended period of time. I'm hearing reports from borrowers that have sent email questions and haven't received responses yet. This was expected. Hopefully the volume will die down over time, and then people will have a much easier time reaching their servicer. But at this point, and I know this isn't a popular opinion, but at this point, we have to have patience to some extent as we get through this extraordinary volume.
And if you're experiencing issues, there are some places that you can file complaints, and complaints are super helpful in shaping policy of the future. And they also, the more complaints that a given agency receives about something, a particular issue, the more likely they are to respond to it. So there are kind of three options on the complaint side. You can complain with the Federal Student Aid Ombudsperson within the Department of Education. You could complain to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And then also some states have ombudspersons at the state level. We keep a list of those on our website, cancelmystudentdebt.org, if you want to check that out and see if there's an ombudsperson in your state who could help you out as well.
Thank you, Amy. Another audience question from, her name is Boo. Can I apply to the SAVE program if I'm already in the HRSA Nurse Corps Loan Repayment Program?
Yes. Short answer is yes.
Yes, and do it ASAP. I waited. My payment is actually due today. My first student loan payment is due today, and it takes 4 weeks for for your loan servicer to process it. You apply to, studentaid.gov. They send that application electronically to your servicer, and then they still have to approve it. So yes, but do it as soon as possible, because your payment is still due while that, is processing.
Thank you, Alfredo. That's great information to know. So what happens if someone is already in default right now? We got a question from Bex asking this. Amy, do you have a reply for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would definitely check out Fresh Start. This is the initiative for defaulted borrowers. It's meant to be faster, easier way to get out of default. Again, your two options for enrolling in Fresh Start are essentially to call your guarantee agency and ask to be put on a repayment plan. And you're immediately eligible for all the repayment plans that fall under income-driven repayment. And so, you might be able to get a very, a much lower payment than you had before. And then you could also request aid from an eligible school. And so those are kind of your two options, and you have a year to do them. And if you don't do them within the year, you're going to be placed back into default using the original date of delinquency. And so it's a great time to be trying to get out of default in a quicker, easier way.
Thank you, Amy. Talking about default, we see a lot of people, specifically on social media, that are like, well, I'm just, not going to pay my loans. And we understand that it comes from a place of them being really expensive and the monthly payment is really high. But I do think it's important to talk about the consequences that are in place to people that not make payments. So yeah, can we talk a little bit about what happens when you just, do not pay your loans?
Yeah, I hear that from a lot of bars too, and you're right. It comes from frustration. It comes from feeling overwhelmed. It comes from feeling like you didn't get the bang for your buck, which is completely understandable. Unfortunately, with federal student loans, just refusing to pay usually ends up costing you more money in the long run. Federal student loans, they have collection tactics that they don't normally, debt collectors would need to take you to court to get. So they can garnish 15% of your wages, which is almost certainly going to be more expensive than what your payment would be under the SAVE plan. They'll take your tax refund. They can garnish Social Security. They can, under the law, add up to 24% in collection costs to the loans. Perkins loans, they're allowed to add up to 40% in collection costs to the loans. So I would recommend people that are feeling overwhelmed, to look into those lower payment options, because they're most likely going to cost you a lot less money, and never mind the hit to your credit, than just ignoring them or refusing to pay.
Yeah, if I can add, so I actually was in default in 2012, and this was, as Amy mentioned, there's never a good time to be in default, but if there was, it'd be now, because that, coming out of default is a very difficult process. I mean, you're not eligible for any, I decided to address this when I was wanting to get back into grad school, and it's a 9-month rehabilitation program where you cannot miss any payments. So if you're already someone who struggles to make payments on time, that rehabilitation program is going to be, incredibly difficult to maintain. So you definitely don't want to get into default. There's so many programs available now to keep people from getting into default. So I just want to, really elevate that there are folks in this space who, do see this as a tactic of resistance, and we want to honor that. But at the end of the day, this is going to end up costing you more, and it is going to do more damage, to your finances than that act of resistance.
Thank you so much, Alfredo and Betsy, for this. I know we're a bit over time, but I just want to ask one last question, and that's something that I think individually have talked with Betsy and Amy about, and that is scams. We want to make sure to tell people about that. So if you could, either of you tell me a really quick, recommendations for people to be aware of scams.
You start, Amy.
All right. So the Department of Education will always email you. And so if you're getting a phone call from someone that's saying that, you could pay $10 up front and get your debt canceled or something like that, that's a red flag that, it's likely a scam. Remember that if you are a victim of a scam, please file a complaint or talk to your state attorney general to get that on the record. And as you can tell from this conversation, there's so much moving right now. And so there's a lot of leeway for people to kind of take advantage of what's happening right now. So just beware and be vigilant. Make sure you're getting your information from a trusted source like studentaid.gov.
Yeah, and I'll add, I want to second the file a complaint. The Federal Trade Commission, which is ftc.gov, they've been working really hard to try to nail down these student loan scammers. So please file a complaint with them. I'll also add that you never have to pay for student loan advice. And paying someone is not going to get you forgiveness any faster. It's not going to get you the one-time account adjustment ahead of everybody else. It's not going to get you into a program you normally wouldn't be eligible for. Paying someone to help you consolidate is nonsense. In my opinion, the form is not difficult. And again, it won't get you consolidation any faster. So while, paying for help on your student loans in and of itself isn't illegal, it can be very much a red flag. So watch out for that.
Yeah, and just don't give any of your information out over the phone. As Amy mentioned, they will email you. This is anytime there is any, new resource like this, folks come out and they prey on people. They can pull our information, and they know who to go for, and they know that we're desperate. And so don't give out information, and definitely don't fall for any of these scams. And if you do, make sure you report them so other folks don't fall prey to them.
I do want to clarify, if you become delinquent on your student loans, your servicer will call you on the phone. So to say that no one ever calls you isn't 100% true, but your servicer is never going to ask you for your FSA PIN, which was a really good point that Alfredo was bringing up. So nobody legitimate is ever going to ask you for your FSA PIN.
Thank you all for answering this and for answering all these questions. This was a great conversation. We thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Thank you for everyone that tuned in. Please keep sending us your questions and check out our content at apnews.com. So that's a wrap for today's YouTube Live. Thank you so much. And we'll see you all soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, we're all